Councillor Pagecroft, and I would like to welcome you to the All Cambridge City Council's Hybrid Licensing Subcommittee meeting, taking place on Monday 20th of June at 10:30am. Joining me are Councillor Naomi Bennett and Councillor Sam Carling. Pardon.
If I can step in at this point, the first part on the agenda is the election of the chair. If I can have nominations for somebody to chair. Madam, yes?
I nominate Councillor Pagecroft to chair.
Thank you. Any second? Seconded there. Madam, are you prepared to accept the chair?
I am, thank you.
Over to you then.
Okay. Officers present at this meeting include the Licensing Officer Luke Catchpole, Legal Advisor Paul Weller and Committee Manager Claire Tunnicliffe. The meeting producer is Sarah Steed. We are also joined by Heath Thomas, representing Cuba Libre, and the applicant Mr. Gustavo Enrique Garcia Lopez. Forgive the mouth. Welcome to you both. Mr. Thomas, could you confirm if you have any representatives to address the committee concerning crime and prevention of crime, disorder and prevention of public nuisance? Would you mind making the introductions to the committee? Excuse me, could I ask you to use your microphones?
So I will be addressing the committee. The persons with me is the applicant immediately to my right, Mr. Garcia Lopez. Next to Mr. Garcia Lopez is Mr. Edward Veal. He's the gentleman that provided some assessment in terms of noise. Very much Mr. Veal is here in order to answer any questions you may have of him. And similarly, next to Mr. Veal, then I have Mr. Steve Paddock. He's from Evolve Security Company, and behind Steve, then I have Mr. Ray Jones, also from Evolve Security Company, and equally not so much here to make representations of crime and disorder, but perhaps to assist if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Welcome, gentlemen. Police representatives join us today are PC Claire Metcalfe and PS Sean Ems. Thank you. I would also like to welcome Councillor Tim Bick, Market Ward, Councillor, and Mr. Daniel Imageflower, Environmental Health, who have registered to speak on this application. Finally, welcome to those public who are watching via the Council's YouTube channel. Housekeeping. I would encourage you to wear masks unless speaking, unless you feel comfortable not wearing them. Unisex and female toilets are located outside the chamber on your right. As you leave, the door is a push button. Should there be a fire alarm, please follow officers out of the building. We've already had a fire alarm test, so there shouldn't be any more going off. If it does go off, please leave. Please take away your rubbish with you and dispose of it. Please try and refer to specific page numbers within the report if you're referring to a specific paragraph or plan. I will now ask if there's any declarations of interest that the councillors would like to declare. I don't have any declarations.
I have no declaration of interest.
I have no declaration to make.
All right, thank you. I presume you all had your paperwork. Do you need me to go through that? Are you aware of the procedure of how this is going to follow on, or would you like me to read this out?
I'm aware of the procedure, thank you, Ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Is the licensing officer ready to present and share the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Please proceed.
An application under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for a premises licence to be issued in respect of Cuba Libre Restaurant and Bar, 19 to 31 Regent Street, has been received from Cuba Libre Restaurant and Bar Limited. The application was served on Cambridge City Council on the 28th of April 2022 and is attached to the report as Appendix A, with a proposed plan of the premises attached Appendix B. The applicant is seeking a premises licence for the following licensable activities: sale of alcohol, Sunday to Thursday, 11 AM to 1 AM, Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 3 a.m. Live music on Wednesdays from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. On Thursday and Friday from 6 p.m. till midnight. And Saturday, midday until midnight. And on Sunday, midday until 11 p.m. Recorded music on Sunday to Thursday, 8 a.m. till 1 a.m. and on Friday and Saturdays, 8 a.m. till 3 a.m. In accordance with the regulations of the Act, the application was advertised on the premises and in a local newspaper to invite representations from responsible authorities and other persons. The last date for submitting representations was the 26th of May 2022. Representations were received from two responsible authorities, Cambridgeshire Constabulary and Cambridge City Council's Environmental Health Department. A further joint representation was received from two other persons. These representations are attached as Appendix C. No representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. The application needs to be determined. Members must determine the application on its individual merits, having reference to the statutory licensing objectives, Cambridge City Council's Statement of Licensing Policy, and Cambridge City Council's Cumulative Impact Assessment. The proposed premises is located within a cumulative impact area and is therefore subject to the Cumulative Impact Assessment. It creates a rebuttable presumption for any new premises licence, applications or variations within a cumulative impact area that are likely to add to the existing cumulative impact will normally be refused if relevant representations are received about the cumulative impact on the licensing objectives. This is unless the applicant can demonstrate why the operation of the premises is involved will not add to the cumulative impact already being experienced. Thank you, Chair.
Please could I ask whether the applicant or agent has any other points of clarification for the officer?
No points of clarification.
Does the police representative any points of clarification they wish to ask for?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Vick, Mr. Image Flower, as public speakers, have you any other points of clarification to the licensing officer's report? Could I just ask a question or two? It's just about the bank holiday openings. Now, I thought all bank holiday openings had to be the same as Sunday openings, not Saturday openings. Am I wrong on this?
Yes, from a licensing point of view, that they can ask for non-seasonal timings, which would include bank holidays, so they could stay open later or open earlier.
So it's along similar lines. Trading into the early hours of Sunday mornings. I mean, most pubs have to close before midnight, do they not? Does this not?
No, there's no requirement in the Licensing Act for any closing on a Sunday morning.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Thomas, would you like to give your presentation? Your representatives and Mr. Garcia Lopez are also welcome to address the committee as and when required.
Thank you, Mark. Can I just say thank you also for giving me some time when I arrived. And I think the committee may be aware, certainly I think the licensing department will be, is that Mr. Garcia Lopez lodged this application individually without having the benefit of legal advice beforehand. And in the normal circumstances, we would have had lots of conversations before today. And sometimes in circumstances like this, it's not intentional and it's a new experience for my clients. So I'm grateful for your patience. We might need a little bit more as we go through today, but I'll try and draw things out for you. Whilst you retired, I had asked for a copy of the old Pizza Hut licence to be brought out of store so we could all have a look at it. And perhaps with a view to looking to ourselves what the starting point is for today. And part of my role as an advocate for the applicant is, of course, to put forward his case. And it's that funneling bit, trying to identify for us today in this discussion that we're going to have as what are the relevant things for us to consider. And oftentimes the starting point when I'm doing a hearing before a licensing committee where we're talking about the cumulative impact policy is really, is this an occasion where you as a licensing committee ought to be considering refusing the application in line with the policy or doing something else? And here, it would be my respectful submission that the starting point here isn't a refusal of an application. The starting point is looking back to see what was here in the not too distant past and what was in place during the cumulative impact policy. So you can see what was acceptable at that time, because there's no evidence that's before you as a licensing subcommittee that would indicate that Pizza Hut's license was surrendered or revoked or removed, whatever words we want to use, due to crime and disorder or public nuisance. That wasn't the case. It was a license that was in place as a restaurant, and the reason it ceased to exist is because Pizza Hut, as one of those very large national chains, was hit financially, decided that it was closed 29 of its restaurants, and Regent Street happened to be one of them. And then they gave the license back. They surrendered it at that time. So it's not that I've got a history of crime and disorder or public nuisance that gave rise to its removal or revocation. And I sought to have a conversation with the responsible authorities just to try and quickly, and I'm very grateful for their time, to try and agree with them what the starting point might be. And certainly from Cambridgeshire Police perspective and environmental health perspective, they agree that actually a restaurant licence in similar terms is not something, as far as they would concern, give rise to then the concerns about the cumulative impact policy that you have in place. And that fits very well in line with the Section 182 guidance, and it's paragraph 1444 is the 182 guidance, and when you read through that, you will see in terms of what it says, and forgive me, I'll just draw it up here. 1444 is something that says the cumulative impact assessment should never be absolute. Statements of licensing policy should always allow for the circumstances of each application to be considered properly, and for applications that are unlikely to add to the cumulative impact on the licensing objectives to be granted. After receiving relevant representations in relation to a new application for or a variation of a licence or certificate, the licensing authority must consider whether it would be justified in departing from its CIA in the light of the individual circumstances of the case. The impact can be expected to be different for premises within different styles and characteristics. For example, while a large nightclub or high-capacity public house might add to the problems of cumulative impact, a small restaurant or theatre may not. And it goes on to say, if the licensing authority decides that an application should be refused, it will still need to show that the grant of the application would undermine the promotion of one or more of the licensing objectives, and that appropriate conditions would be ineffective in preventing the problems involved. Now, that latter bit, I don't believe I sit within that criteria. I think that it's fair to say that history presents to me an application that has been appropriate, or a licence that's been appropriate within the CIA, and that's the licence that's before you. And for Pizza Hut, you will see that that is a licence where Monday to Saturday sold alcohol till midnight, Sunday to 23:30 hours. It had no opening or closing hours, and the reason it didn't have any opening or closing hours was because it was a licence that was in existence under the 1964 legislation and had its grandfather rights carried on in 2005 when the 2003 Licensing Act came into being. And you get this anomaly with really old licences, but essentially you'll notice that it was a licence that would operate. Under the 1964 provisions, it would have been able to operate for 30 minutes, so it would have closed at 12:30 on Monday to Saturday. It would have closed at midnight on a Sunday. And the Licensing Act 2003, as much as we either love it or hate it, the opening and closing hours were not something that was in the legislation. It came in back in the application forms. That's why we have it for you today. But so we have that licence, and this was a licence which was a restaurant licence. And it was a restaurant licence because if you look at the final page of the licence that's in front of you, it tells you that intoxicating liquor could only be supplied or served to persons who were taking a table meal there and for consumption as an ancillary to that meal. throwing my notes around in front of you, actually, and I'm dropping them. So, but for me, that would be our starting point. If I'm looking to ask you to narrow down the issues that we're going to discuss today, then at the very forefront of that, I'd be saying to you, this isn't about considering refusal of my client's application, but rather, should you as a committee be granting a restaurant licence in similar terms to Pizza Hut, or should you, or would you rather exercise some discretion to do what my client would like to do? I sometimes call it a chameleon type use, and as I address you will understand that. But that's the issues that we have today. And I think it's fair to say that in talking to my friends with the police and in talking to environmental health, that starting point is one that wouldn't be in dispute. Now, just in terms of my client's application, you'll see from, or I've heard from the licensing officer in his committee report, that he spoke to you about the hours that my client sought. I am instructed to amend those at the outset. In his application, he had sale of alcohol till 1 a.m. Sunday to Thursday. He also, in his application, had that he would close at 1 a.m. on Sunday to Thursday, so he could sell at 12:59 and 59 seconds, and a second later we need somebody to be out at the door. We thought about that with my client, and actually, insensibly, he's saying, well, no, of course, I'd want to close my bar before that, give them some time to leave, and so he would modify his application to Sunday to Thursday, 12:30 a.m., Friday and Saturday, 2:30 a.m., and then it would follow then when you see the opening and closing times that he would close at 1 a.m. Sunday to Thursday. He would like to be able to close at 3 a.m. on a Friday and Saturday. That's the modification I would like to make to his application. Now, I need to tell you a little bit about what Cuba Libre is intended to be, and from my client's perspective. And again, I ask you to give him some leeway in terms of he's the one that wrote the form without the experience of thinking about what he should put in it. We're going to have to make some changes as we go along, and ultimately the gift is yours as to whether you grant it or not. Cuba Libre. So my client, Mr. Garcia, runs existing premises in the city. He knows the city in terms of his experience. The premises that he's involved in are called
The Emperor.
the Emperor. They are public house premises, but here it's not something that he proposed in the same vein. He sees that there is opportunity within the city to do something a little different, to provide a venue, a restaurant, and he describes it in his own words as a restaurant and lounge bar. What he intends by that is to have a restaurant that is selling and providing Latin American food. And that is the whole genre of his restaurant and its name and its theme and its style. He wants customers to be able to come to his premises, to be able to have a drink before they dine, to go on and to dine, and when they have a drink before they dine, to be sat at a table, to then go into the principal dining part of the premises, where they will be table service, always sat at a table, where they might then enjoy some Latin American music from a live trio or quartet. Again, providing Latin American music. Now, a very short, and it was incredibly short, clip of music was provided to me by my client, which I uploaded, and I'm not sure whether you've had an opportunity to look at that clip. That was taken in my client's premises. That is the genre of music that he wants to play in his premises. And he wants to be able to play it at a level that allows, if you and I were having dinner together, that we could still have a conversation with each other across the table without raising our voices. And so it's ancillary to our dining, but yet we're still being entertained justify it being there. That's what he would like to have. And when those individuals have finished their meal, they may want to remain in his premises and continue to listen to the music, live music, as he's put in his application, I believe would finish at no later than midnight, and then he would have recorded music that would carry on. Now, he would like to be able to operate in that way with a terminal hour of 1 a.m. On Sunday to Thursday, and a later terminal hour of 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. What does he say? Well, he says, most definitely, this is not going to become a nightclub or a music venue. So when I say that, he is telling me and asking me to tell you that all of his customers, and we have 85 covers, 85 seats at tables in our premises. So he is saying that all customers will be required to be sat. So we're saying that there's a limit, no more than 85 people, excluding staff, would be in this premises. And that they would be sat at all times. There is no vertical drinking in Cuba Libre. I would also say there's nothing like a dance floor. We're not suggesting this is loud music blaring out to entertain, we're all going to get up and dance. No, this is that background music which can be played in his premises. I'm sorry, that's my laptop. Background music which can be played in his premises, which they would then enjoy and be able to have their evening. And I've asked him, well, what's this reason? Why do we want to have long hours? Why do we want to go to 3 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday? He said, well, I want to attract a type of clientele and give them something that doesn't exist, as he feels, in the town today, where it's oftentimes a reasonably affluent member of the public can come in and afford to drink and dine in his premises. It is not the stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap type premises in terms of its offering, where they can enjoy their evening and then not have to feel that if they want to carry on enjoying their evening, they have to leave and move on elsewhere, that they can just remain in his premises and then leave. So that's his, when he views his own business and what he would like to produce and have, that's what he has. So I understand that there's maybe been some either media comment or misunderstanding where people are saying, is this going to be the new music venue for Cambridge? It most certainly is not. We're not inviting guest bands coming in, and the only genre of music is what we want to have that's going to be complementary to our food and our Latin American theme for our premises. And similarly, with the recorded music that's being played, we want that to be, again, complementary, which again is set at that level, which one might even argue doesn't even amount to regulated entertainment if it's set at that level where people can still carry on their conversations. Now, in terms of how he'd like to operate it, then people will book tables and they'll be encouraged to book because there is this limited capacity for his premises. And they can book online or they can reserve and speak to a member of staff. In doing so, they're managing the people that are coming to their premises. And because my client recognises that he's asked for perhaps, a normal restaurant licence, we know licensable activities until midnight, normally would close at about 12:30. My client accepts. The weekdays, he's asking for 30 minutes longer. On Friday and Saturday, he's asking for 2.5 hours longer. So he's thought about what will be the things that he would put in place to ensure that he could run his venue in promoting the licensing objectives, not giving rise to the problems of crime and disorder that clearly are raised by my colleagues for Cambridgeshire Police. And that is why he has engaged the services of Evolve, which is the security company. And his proposal is that on weekdays, on Sundays to Thursdays, he has one member of security staff that would work with his supervisor, the person that meets and greets people at the door, and they will be there to help then ensure and make sure that as the premises operate, that they are complying with the licensing objectives. Now, with a booking system in place, my client doesn't envisage that this is going to be, it's not a fast food restaurant, this is a come in and sit in and dine, and it's at least a 90-minute plus experience if you're going to be in the premises longer, if you're going to want to dwell there. So he does not expect there to be queues of people waiting to get in, and he expects that this to be an orderly manner. His premise is designed in such that he's got a principal dining area at the front, there is a dispense bar, and the people can wait for the lower dining tables in that dispense bar area whilst being sat at tables. They can eat in that area as well if they choose to do so. But he doesn't anticipate there to be queues of people trying to get into his premises. Because when it's booked in terms of the booking system, then his member of staff who's meeting and greeting customers and his door staff are there to say, I'm terribly sorry, we are fully booked this evening. We'd love for you to come and book a table with us on another occasion. Here are our details. Thank you very much. And you will understand in terms of that. Of course, any new venue opening in a city can have some initial popularity. My clients is key to that. And if there were any requirement for a queue, we could only imagine it would be a very short queue, and it would be one that would be aligned along the side of the building, and hence having somebody like Evolve, who are experienced security providers in the city, is something that they would work with on that. But certainly the way that we expect it to work with a booking system, a limited capacity of 85 customers where we're not having that vertical drinking, then people aren't then queuing in that particular way, and there is a time when a capacity is reached and clearly there'd be no more admittance to the premises. So I think in nutshell, I suppose, that's trying to give you what it is my client is wanting to deliver here in terms of his premises. He is a no-smoking restaurant. He doesn't have an external area. In terms of the hours that he's looking to operate, he is quite content to accept a restriction on his licence that there would be no admittance to his premises post-midnight, Sunday to Thursday, and no admittance to his premises post-0100 hours on a Friday and Saturday. It equally means that you don't have people trying to move between his premises. They would be there. And he tells me that with his 85 covers, what are the concerns there? Well, we don't have vertical drinking. We don't have people going to the bar to get a drink. People are served by a waiter or waitress member of staff, and so we have complete supervision over what is the alcohol consumption on a table. We know that we don't tolerate drunkenness, and certainly we wouldn't tolerate any intoxication within our premises. And the way that that's managed, you'll understand how we're able to say that, because we have a far greater degree of supervision rather than, for example, people queuing at a bar and taking it to who knows who and where for its consumption later on. So this affords complete control in terms of capacity and supervision for my client's premises. Now, my client made an error in lodging his application because he omitted to apply for late night refreshment. He didn't appreciate its legal term and thought it would naturally follow. I've spoken to him about that. He understands that if you're with me in any way, shape or form today, I need to vary his licence at a later date just to bring in the late night refreshment piece in line with that, because then clearly he does intend to have food available throughout his premises. Now, and I've dwelt mostly about the evening times. Of course, he does intend to be open from 8 a.m. He would like to be able to cater for breakfast if there's demand for that, but definitely lunch trade as well. Those are not contentious issues, as I understand it, before you as a licensing committee. The contentious issue, of course, is whether or not he would be permitted to allow some non-diners into his premises, and whether or not he would be allowed to trade those later hours beyond midnight and closing at some time beyond 12:30. Those are my own perceptions of what's in contention. In terms of being able to open to non-diners, my client would like to be able to open to some non-diners. Sometimes people will see a venue like his, they'll want to come in and have a feel and experience it, but maybe not want to go the whole hog and go on to dine. And if he has a capacity which can be limited to allow some non-diners into his premises, those are the ones that can come, be served at a table with a drink by a waiter and a waitress, can see and get the feel of the thing, may even go on to eat, or alternatively come back on another occasion and book a table for dining experience in the premises. And that's what he would like to have. And in terms of that, and we were talking about how that can be conditioned, it can be. You can have a condition on a license that, for example, no more than 25 non-diners be permitted at any time to be in the premises, which then allows you as a licensing committee to give him some fluidity as to how he would like to run this operation, yet at the same time give you something to satisfy your concerns that this isn't going to become a vertical drinking bar. And that condition of no more than 25, together with all persons to be sat at tables, is something that might readily be able to resolve some of those concerns if you as a committee hold them. So I do put that forward to you, members of the committee, that my client would like to have some non-diners attend, and perhaps we could have that in that limited format. And in terms of the hours, I've addressed you on parts of the hours, and I've already indicated to you that my client would be satisfied to have a restriction on a last entry time into his premises, midnight, Sunday to Thursday, 1 a.m, Friday and Saturday. Now, if I may, actually, I would just like to take you through some of the concerns that have been raised. In terms of the Cambridgeshire Police, they quite rightly point out a number of things in their representation. Firstly, yes, of course, we are an cumulative impact area, which I agree, and you note my starting point there is a restaurant licence, and can we exercise some discretion? You've heard me talk about the type of premises this will be, and hopefully I correct any perception that this would be some music venue with vertical drinking, because we can condition all of that away and set a capacity in terms of the number of people that would be here. In terms of how it might be different, then there is a 2012 case, which was an application by Brewdog in, I think, October 2012, might be quite wrong in the actual month, which was an application by an applicant for a new premises licence in a cumulative impact area. And in that case, on appeal, the district judge granted the appeal. And in doing so, it was looking at the type of the venue that it was, and your legal advisor might be able to help you with that, perhaps when you retire. But the Brewdog case was looking at, well, we distinguish ourselves from other venues, which my client has and is seeking to do, in as much as he's not a vertical drinking establishment where people will be sat at tables only and not attending at a bar. And then we're saying that of our 85 capacity, we know that 60 people will be dining in our premises, and only no more than 25 people would be somebody who'd be a non-diner. And so already we're setting out our stock that distinguishes us, hopefully, from other venues within the cumulative impact area. And those are matters which quite properly you're able to consider in whether or not you use your discretion to move away from your policy and your cumulative impact assessment policy. And those are all matters which you can say support grounds to move away from your policy. And the Brewdog case was about a brewery at that time. Brewdog wasn't quite so well known, and about having beer drinkers who were more connoisseurs of beer drinkers, who were buying pints of beer which was more expensive than the norm, and it wasn't the stack it high, get it down your neck, and that's where that phrase came from in the actual case. But I'll leave it to your legal advisor if you need to talk to him about that, perhaps when you retire. But it's already set there within case law that these are the sort of matters that you can contemplate that allow you to exercise discretion. So in terms of the police case, the police very much hang their hat on the fact that this is within the cumulative impact policy area. I've given you some conditions and limitations on the licence that you could impose that would allow you to exercise your discretion to deal with that. Over and above that, then the police make a number of other comments. I'll just find the right page in their representation. I'm looking at page 41 of the bundle onwards. They're quite correct to say that the Pizza Hut licence is no longer in existence. We don't disagree with that, but the mere fact it is in existence, and our discussion today indicates that that is the starting point for us today. The police indicate they had no pre-application consultation. I can apologise on behalf of my client for that. He is not aware of that policy in terms of that. Had he been, I'm sure he wished he'd done it quite differently today. Hopefully my friends at the police take that on board quite graciously in terms of my client's intentions. It wasn't simply to railroad himself into this application. He just didn't understand that this is what would be a process that would follow. In terms of the concerns about our location, well, we've been a licensed premises here for a number of years that predate the 2003 Act. There is no evidence when it was used as a licensed premises that we caused either concerns for pedestrians or cyclists in the use of our premises. And I understand from Mr. Paddock, who works in this locality looking after other licensed premises, that actually in terms of cyclists and pedestrians beyond the evening, it's a very different scene to the street scene that we see during the day and this morning, for example, when it was very busy there. So I think in terms of my client's premises, when you understand that it's not a fillet full of vertical drinkers, but actually 85 people sat at tables, that the likelihood of it giving rise to those concerns is significantly not removed completely in terms of the way that my client would operate. Other matters that result concerns of ones of noise nuisance. Now, in terms of noise nuisance, and I'll come on to the EHA matter, but I believe that the police are concerned about noise nuisance being caused to residents, and they set that out on page 42. Predominantly, I suppose, it's as people disperse. My clients have said that they will ensure that on all days that they operate, that they have a member of staff from Evolve on duty with them. And that is just to ensure that as people do leave their premises, that they do disperse and they do move away. They're not leaving premises in an excited or agitated state. It's not that they've just been dancing and listening to loud music. It's a very calm exit from my client's premises. And the security staff will remain on duty until the last customer then has exited the premises and dispersed. And again, that's something that my client's quite happy for you to impose as a requirement in his licence. Queuing, my client is quite content, if required, to have a queuing policy to demonstrate where that would be, and for that to be produced and shared with the licensing officer of the council and with Cambridgeshire Police before licence of activities commence. As I say, we don't believe we're going to have queues, but we'd have the policy because we would have thought about it if it was required. But in terms of pre-booked tables and the ability for people to come in and sit at a table while they wait for their lower table to be ready for dining, hopefully you'll appreciate that that shouldn't be a necessity. And we have no external area, and we will market ourselves as a no-smoking premises. But equally, we are cognizant of the fact that somebody still might go out, and we will monitor and we will supervise that to make sure that if anybody does leave our premises, that they are not going to give rise to causing a nuisance or pedestrians or cyclists if they do so. I should add that no drinking vessels are permitted to leave the premises at all. That will simply not be permitted in terms of my client's application. And in terms of his premises, he's quite content that if I've mentioned to you about that last entry time, if you're with me, but equally you would have a no readmittance, so nobody could leave or go out after those times either. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions when you have them in terms of that, and I appreciate you allowing me to address you at some length. When I look at the environmental health representation, then again, the comment was made to me quite clearly that what I'm presenting is very different to what people perceive to be the application at the outset. And so hopefully I will have corrected a number of perceptions, whether they're wrongly given by my client when he's trying to explain himself in his application, or whether it's just from comment elsewhere. But I've set out our stock now in terms of that. When EHO had some concerns about noise to neighbouring residents, that was both from outside, of which I've addressed you a little bit on already, and from within the premises if we're having music within the premises. And Mr. Edward Veal, who sits directly next to my client, is from Veal Associates, and you'll see within your bundle there was a short 6-page document that he produced. And on his assessment, and he's done an actual assessment of the premises having been there, and the nature of the music that's going to be provided within the premises, that he is satisfied that that will not give rise to a noise outbreak to those neighbouring residential properties that would cause a public nuisance or a statutory nuisance, and that the building is constructed sufficiently for that. It has a double lobby door, and the way in which it's going to be used with staff in attendance and meeting and greeting people, then we will not have that where the doors are left open so there's no noise outbreak from the premises. So that minimises noise outbreak. Also the type of music that's being played in there, and Mr. Veal has confirmed to me, and my clients confirmed this as well, that a noise limiting device will be installed in the premises, and that can be set at a level in agreement with the environmental health officer. So if they wish to come along and agree that with my client, we would willingly do that. And that would ensure absolutely then that we would not be able to exceed an appropriate decibel to give rise to that noise nuisance. And as for concerns about intoxicated people who speak loudly when they leave, I've already said to you, my client does not tolerate intoxication in his premises, and the manner in which he delivers the alcohol allows him to be satisfied about the control that he's having in place and the way in which we operate.
Excuse me, sir. I appreciate all the effort you've gone into, but there are quite a few questions that we have now that I think we need to ask. Could you just give me a rough idea of how much longer before we can start asking our questions?
I'll possibly only be another 5 minutes or so. I'm sorry, I was told that you'd afford me all the time I needed.
We're all getting on a bit, we could forget.
I'm grateful I'm not paid by the word, if only. A noise limiting device is the one thing that we've spoken about in terms of that. And I appreciate that I've got a letter of representation from the parties as well. And they will have heard some of the comments that I've made outside and the comments that I've made to you today. Hopefully that will allay a lot of concern that they held about these premises and how they might be used. And I should add, there is comment from individuals about premises such as University Arms Hotel. I have no evidence they were equally able to make a representation themselves. there is a complete absence of any representation from any resident or indeed the University Arms Hotel that's before you today to consider in terms of the application. Can I just ask my client if there's anything else he'd like me to add before I finish? There we are. Thank you very much.
Right, now. Does a licensing officer, or councillors, do you have any questions?
My first question to Mr. Thomas is he has differentiated between his client's restaurant, describing it as a place where you go to eat and stay, and a fast food restaurant, which is what Pizza Hut was. At a fast food restaurant, a customer's stay is very limited, and there is a limit to how much alcohol is consumed. So I think, do you accept that the profile of the restaurant and the alcohol consumption is going to be very different from that at Pizza Hut?
So, can I just say, I don't accept that Pizza Hut's a fast food restaurant. It's not. A fast food restaurant is one where you might go to and the food is prepared immediately for you to take away and consume either on the pavement or within the premises. This Pizza Hut, my reference to a fast food restaurant was something different. It wasn't to Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut has a dwell time equally, and its dwell time could equally be 2 hours within the restaurant. What I'm saying here is that we are a restaurant, and that there may be longer dwell time within our restaurant, but the measures that we have in place limiting, we don't allow people to move around, they're sat at tables, it's not vertically drinking, it's not standing at a bar. The controls that we have in place are such that we are satisfied with the licensing objectives, particularly if we're considering about consumption of alcohol in our premises.
The second question is about the plan on page 33. Is it possible for you or your client to indicate which of the tabled areas are on that plan?
Yes, it is. If you bear with me just one moment. Follow my pen, perhaps. I don't know who that, or do you want me to come and stand before you? Yeah, I'm happy to do so, don't worry.
It'll just be a few minutes while we look at the plan together. You see, Mark? I'd also like to hear from the applicant himself, if I may. Mr. Lopez, are you able to tell us something about your background and career in the licensed trade?
Yeah, sure. I've been working at the Emperor Pub, running it for 7 years now. And I'm the PDS of that place for 2 years at the moment. So we have the experience of dealing with crowds and managing people since from COVID time, before COVID time, after COVID time. So we've been dealing with the how to manage the tables together with the security people, and also, you know, booking the tables for the people and managing, I mean, the amount of the quantity of people in order to be able to manage the premises in a way that everything is under control.
And your previous catering business, that's the Emperor Public House at 21 Hills Road, Cambridge, outside the cumulative impact zone, is it?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Outside the cumulative impact zone.
Just,
I believe
I'll just
it
confirm
is.
it is in the cumulative impact area. It is.
You were operating premises in the cumulative impact zone, but you're unaware that you're unaware of the cumulative impact zone?
I'm sorry, my client is aware, but not as a person that's doing all the paperwork for an application and how it gets brought to the committee and all of the nuances that somebody like me who does licensing, the licensing officers, you know, we are immersed in this from this perspective. My client is the one who operates it and puts it into practice and makes sure that it works.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to hand over to Councillor Carling now.
Yeah, so if I may just clarify, you've said that with late night refreshments, foods intend to be served pretty much until closing hours, like half an hour before, 2:30 on the days where it closes at 3, 12:30 the days it closes at 1, that's not correct?
No, that's not correct. I didn't say an hour, actually.
Okay.
I said that my client failed to apply for late night refreshment. And subject to whatever happens in the application today, I would need to put in an application to vary his licence so that he could have late night refreshment. And depending on how you decide it, I think from my client's perspective, he would certainly want to continue to have his kitchen open until midnight, but then maybe something more limited after midnight. So he would need to, let's see, and I'm afraid he's very much in your hands as a committee today for that.
No, of course, and thank you for confirming that. I think the issue that raises that perhaps I'd like to ask about is the fact that if food is going to be limited after a certain time, but alcohol continues to be sold, there may become a danger of kind of a bit of a character of vertical drinking taking place in terms of, yes, people may be sat down, but if they're just drinking, that's likely to cause issues. How would you respond to that?
Yes, we accept that that's a concern. And whilst we were saying that, you know, the lion's share of our attendees will have been those that will have attended and will have dined and will have had a substantial table meal. And so that addresses some of our concerns significantly. And also we're monitoring our that's being consumed throughout to ensure that we're not allowing intoxication in our premises.
I just have a few. Mostly, I'm quite concerned about security. If you've only got one security officer on for 5 nights a week, how many security officers are you having for Friday and Saturday? And how are they going to monitor people outside smoking as well as trying to monitor people coming in and out? There's only one person on. And how are they going to sort that one out? like to just answer me that one, please, and then I'll come back with another one?
Can I help just initially? There's a dedicated member of staff who's to meet and greet customers. So on a Sunday to Thursday, that dedicated member of staff, whether it's Mr. Garcia or one of his managers, is working and alongside or assisted by a member of security staff.
Could I just ask the member of security staff what their policies and the
Yes,
way they work?
Yes, but allow me to, I'm really sorry actually, because of course I'm paid to do a role today. If I can address you and then you can hear anything further from the member of security staff as well. But at Sunday, how it's intended to work is that Sunday to Thursday, one member of staff, alongside the member of management, who's in terms of meeting and greeting, Fridays and Saturdays, it's proposed that there be two members of staff, together with management staff within the premises as well. Are you happy then, Steve, to answer?
On regards of keeping an eye on the total venue, where you're situated within the actual lobby area, you've got full scope of the actual bar. Obviously, if a member of the public or leaves to go outside to have a cigarette or whatever, then you will step back out of the public, of that little lobby area. Then you're monitoring, seeing what's there. Then you can keep an eye of how many people have gone outside. Then you will then monitor when they walk back in. If there's more people that are joining those people, that's when we would say, sorry, you're not part of the actual party that's been outside. Then you've got the overall spectre of everything, so you can see exactly what's going on. Again, as I say, part of the management team that you'll be with, mirroring and imaging you as licensed security, that's when we come into play, obviously, of removing them out of the bar if they need to be removed.
Thank you very much. And can I also ask, how long do you expect people to sit at a table all evening, so that you're not turning those tables over, so you're getting more, more people in, you're not selling more, you're not making more money? How are you going to balance this out?
So my client has a booking system for his tables, and in discussing this very point actually, so a general allowance time for dining in the restaurant area will be approximately 2 hours at the table. Some people may come in, they would have a drink pre-dinner, and that would be sat down by the dispense bar area, go into the main part of the restaurant, where they would then dine. If they wanted to remain after their meal, then they could be moved to one of the tables, which is a taller table where they'd still be sat. And then so you can see then that's a different style. So they're still served by waiter and waitress, but then the lower tables, predominantly for dining, then are free if there's a second sitting, for example, of diners that are coming through. Does that help answer your question, Mark?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I just want to ask about the volume of the music, because as someone who's a little bit hearing impaired, that music, if it's really loud, it would make a very uncomfortable place to visit.
Unfortunately, ma'am, that music was played in what is a pretty hollow structure at the moment, with nothing that absorbs the noise that's played in the venue. So it's not a true reflection of what you would feel with the soft furnishings in the venue and with customers sat at tables. It would be significantly different. Edward Veal, whose job it is to deal with noise, has contemplated that aspect, and it very much is a level of music that's played where you can sit at the table and converse and not have those problems.
And also, I think I read something about insulation, noise insulation. Is that going to be going in to stop for the residents who obviously live close by? And actually, I would think, is the second story in this building got residents in? Because you only got the ground floor and the first floor, and there's a second floor. Has that got residents in? I mean, is there any noise insulation going to be applied?
I'm sorry, just one moment, please. The comments by Mr. Veal at page 6 of his document were that the noise that's generated in the building would not give rise to noise nuisance in those residential dwellings. And so there's a noise limiting device that they will have installed in any event, and so that will ensure that no noise actually reaches a decibel level that causes noise nuisance. Hopefully that will help. As I say, when I addressed you earlier, I offered a condition whereby my client would happily work with EHO in terms of setting that level at an agreed level.
Thank you. I think my colleagues have one more question each and then we'll carry on.
Right. Thank you, Chair. My question is to the applicant's representative, Mr. Thomas. You've mentioned a number of possible conditions throughout your speech. Do you have a written list summarising more available that you could print or email to us?
I don't, but if the committee were to retire, once you've heard from all parties, I'm very happy to put that together. And that's principally because lateness of instructions. I came to Cambridge this morning at 8:30 to have a meeting with my client to prep for this hearing. In normal circumstances, I would have had it for you. It would have been in the application, I would have hoped, actually.
And, sorry, one more question for the applicants. I'm conscious that we have an application that's come together and been changed at the last minute. Do you feel you have an opportunity to think through those conditions and be comfortable that you can meet them?
Thank you very much. One other thing from me, on page 24, under paragraph B, the prevention of crime and disorder, this is the bit discussing how we're going to meet the licensing objectives. There's safer clubbing guidelines referred to, and I know we've just kind of gone through how the premises isn't intended to be a club. I'm just wondering what specifically in them sort of is being referenced.
My client has clearly made reference to something which is not relevant for his application. And so in terms of what would be the appropriate conditions, I've addressed you on many of them. I'm very happy to put them together in one sensible document. But I asked the question myself actually going through that, and it's just an applicant in person trying to do an application thinking that they're doing the right thing when clearly they're not.
Now, can I just ask, does the licensing officer have any points of clarification they would like to ask the applicant? No. The police representatives, do you have any questions?
I do, but would it be possible, Chair, to have a welfare break first?
I beg your pardon?
Would it be possible to have a welfare break first?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we take a 5 minute? Yeah, 5 minute break, okay? So ask the police to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do have a number of questions, if that's okay. Thank you, Mr Thomas, for clarifying what your client is actually wanting, because it has been quite confusing, I think. And it's just a shame that there wasn't any pre-application advice sought on this stage, really. Obviously, we've been discussing about the changes of timings as well now to what was originally in the application. I still have concerns over the lateness of the hours asked for, particularly on a Friday and Saturday, and they are still vastly more than what Pizza Hut had previously. Just wanted to clarify the timings in relation to the kitchen closure, if I could, because in the application it does actually say 10:30. And my concern is along the lines of, if you're closing the kitchen at 10:30, but you're still wanting an alcohol licence until 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, you are drinking for, what, 4.5 hours after having consumed a meal, or actually may not have had to consume a meal if they're talking about having 25 non-diners. So I do have concerns about that still. And I do appreciate now that what has been asked for is significantly different to the perception, I think, that we had all been given from the actual original application. So that was my first issue that I still have. We're discussing about the no vertical drinking. And obviously, is that, and my question is, we're talking about restaurant conditions. Are you wanting to have ancillary to meal only for alcohol, apart from 25 diners? Is that, sorry, Chair, I just need clarification on that. Because that is, again, it's very different from a restaurant condition where you have, it's just alcohol is ancillary to a meal.
The answer through you, Chair, is yes. And I'm not reinventing the wheel in terms of it has been done elsewhere many times, where you have venues which would like to have some non-diners but make sure it's predominantly restaurants. So the caveat would be that save for no more than 25 persons, the sale and consumption of alcohol, so 25 persons at any one time, the sale and consumption of alcohol by customers in the premises shall be ancillary to a table meal. So it's an amendment to what you and I would normally say is the standard restaurant condition. And that's what allows that flexibility then.
Okay, would you like another comeback?
Thank you. I'm just concerned about the workability of that and how the staff actually keep on top of that. So that's just a concern I have in relation to it, really.
So it's table service, waiter and waitress. So there's normally a tab that's going. They know what's been delivered to those tables. They'll be able to demonstrate. They're aware that at any time, any member of the licensing authority or responsible officer can come in and inquire who's within the premises. It works very well, for example, within Westminster City Council areas, where similarly Westminster has a very large cumulative impact policy that's in place, and this is then something that's designed, it's going back to the 182 guidance, paragraph 1444, about not having absolute rules and trying to have some flexibility that meets an operator's way in which they can run their business, but at the same time addressing the concerns that you hold.
Thank you. Moving on to, we mentioned about the SIA staff requirements. I don't know whether I missed the answer about, you asked about the Friday and Saturday, whether or not it's going to be one or more SIA. I don't know if I missed that answer.
So in terms of that, we volunteered a minimum of 2 SIA door staff on Friday and Saturday from 2200 hours until close.
Thank you. And would that be in addition to the meet and greet staff?
Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about the queuing aspect of it, and I think at one point you said it would be aligned alongside the building. Which side of the building were you referring to, please?
So the first premise was we don't expect there to be queuing, but if there were and we needed to plan for it, then we would have it where you see the entrance door as it wraps round towards the. So it's away from the main road, and it's just wrapping around that front bit of the building. So it's glass fronted area. Shall I show you on my plan? Is that easier? Yeah. Okay. And first and foremost, we don't envisage, given the style in which we're going to operate, that that's going to be something that would be required.
Thank you very much. We're talking about last entry as well. Can you just confirm to me what timings you were saying with the last entry?
Yeah, so we were saying last entry, Sunday to Thursday, midnight. Last entry, Friday and Saturday, 1 a.m.
Thank you. I think that has changed, your client has changed that from an email that was sent to Environmental Health, where they mentioned, excuse me, I have to try and find it, that there was a last entry of 11 p.m. So has your client changed his mind on that?
Yeah, my client's just had the benefit of legal advice and looking to see what works sensibly within his business. And so no agreement was made in relation to those matters. And so having met with me and taken advice on how it would work within his business, then it's enabled him just to reflect and come up with something that he knows can be worked sensibly.
Thank you. I think this is about a question, again, about the kitchen area. You mentioned late night refreshment had been omitted from the application itself. Is it still the intention that the kitchen will be closing at 10:30, or are you now looking at having late night refreshment further on into the evening and early hours of the morning?
So at present, the intention would be the kitchen to close at 11 p.m. because there is no late night refreshment that's sought. My client would, if the application were granted to him, vary his licence to permit late night refreshment until midnight.
Thank you. And would that be allowing to have a meal until midnight, or would it just be snacks after 11, hot snacks after 11 o'clock?
It would be open kitchen, allowed to have a meal until midnight.
Thank you. So, just in relation to the queuing aspect again, I appreciate that how you've explained it now is very different to what my perceptions were of the actual application. You mentioned that you don't perceive there being a queue, and I can understand with the concept now that you've provided to us, I can see that there will be less of a queuing issue potentially, particularly if there's booking and you can allot times for arrival of people. You mentioned that you're going to, if there is a requirement for a queue, it will go down back towards the terrace area. How would that be managed, please?
It'd be managed by the member of door staff and member of management staff who's doing meet and greet, who's supervising that front area of the premises. What we would do is have a written queue policy that we would share with you before we operated, such that then we have agreement as to how that would operate.
As I said in the representation, I do appreciate now that the requirement for a queue may be less. I still do have concerns about any additional congestion in that front area because of the designated cycle path, the crossing in particular as well. So I think I still do have concerns, and I do appreciate that your client doesn't perceive there will be a queue, but I still would have concerns over that.
Having visited sites myself as well, I don't share your concern. I think that there's sufficient width there to enable an orderly queue, if one were required, to be managed at that location without coming into conflict or causing any nuisance to any pedestrians or cyclists. And I think in terms of the style of the business whereby we do have a facility for somebody to come and sit at a table inside whilst they wait for a table, again, that's why we're reasonably confident that we do not require queues for our premises. Because if we have no capacity, people will be told, I'm terribly sorry, we have no capacity, please book another day and come back. And our policy in terms of queuing is that we want to make sure that we have considered that, and if we needed to have one, to make sure that we have a policy in place, not that it's been thought upon the night if that arose. And I think that's that. But in terms of, you know, limited capacity of 85 persons in our premises at any one time, and then the way in which we can control that, I think that the ability for conflict either doesn't exist or is minimised enormously with it being controlled. Evolve Security have years of experience of working with premises in the city and within the cumulative impact area that include queues. And in my meetings with them and discussions with them this morning, they've been able to allay any concerns that I gleaned from the representations that they would be able to manage that without giving rise to the concerns that you raise.
Thank you very much. Next question is just in relation to the smoking area. Now, this was something that I was specifically concerned about in representation, and even more concerned with your client's response to where he wanted to have a managed smoking area, which was a rear fire exit that went straight out onto Regent's Terrace. I'm presuming that is no longer the case, and that your client is not proposing that?
That's correct.
Can I ask, we were discussing about smoking, how would that be managed? If you have half a dozen customers wanting to go out and smoke at the same time, how would that be managed, please?
In regards, if you're having half a dozen people going out at one time for smoking, that's when the door staff will then keep an eye, again, checking the numbers, making sure they're not in the gathering area around the cycle path. And obviously on the pedestrian side, if they are, then we'll disperse. And then obviously make sure that they're aware of their surroundings at all times to make sure that they're not sort of stepping on everybody else's toes. And then, again, when they're coming back into the venue, just monitor that you've got if you've got half a dozen gone out, then you've got that half a dozen come back in, so that you haven't got just someone else that's joining their queue and just going to think they're going to get in to sit in down and have a drink and everything else to join the group.
And of course, just from my own aside, these are of course former licensed premises, and there's no evidence that smoking at the premises gave rise to any concerns that you raised whilst they were operated as licensed premises in that time.
Thank you for that comment. I think the concern I have is that this is more of a destination venue. So I think potentially you're going to have more customers potentially wanting to have a cigarette, rather than if they're just going in to have a pizza at Pizza Hut, there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're unlikely to want to come outside, hang around, have a cigarette and then go back in. I think, as you say, this is a destination venue, which is what your client wants. So there are going to be people who, halfway through a meal or after their pre-drinks, want to go outside, have a cigarette. So I think that there is a capacity for more customers wishing to do that with this venue rather than a Pizza Hut.
Without wishing to be overly legalistic, there is just no evidence to support that proposition. And of course, people would have gone out to smoke, and the habits will have changed to the better since Pizza Hut had its licence pre the 2003 Act, when smoking would have been far more popular. There is no evidence that smoking has given rise to those problems when it's been operated as a licensed premises, and it's only a perceived concern that there may be an issue now rather than an actual concern. And my clients, through his security company, have indicated that they will manage that to ensure that it doesn't give rise to the concerns that the officer raises.
Thank you. The reason that I am concerned about the smoking area is from previous knowledge from other venues that are destination venues in Cambridge. From a crime and disorder perspective, we find that smoking areas are a hot point for issues, for conflict. So I just want to avoid that at all costs when it comes to a new late night licensed premises wanting to open up, particularly where there's restricted outside area and narrow pavements. So I want to make sure that any issues is going to be minimised.
And oftentimes, and again, it's not relevant for this application, oftentimes with those types of external areas that you're talking about, they're areas where individuals are able to stand for longer periods of time with their drink in hand at the same time. Those are times when people can gather here. We have no drinks permitted to leave our venue. Nobody then is outside for prolonged periods of time. And in an area which my client says, they will monitor their staff, they will monitor their customers for their premises. That's all I can say, I'm afraid.
Thank you. I think I'll tend to disagree. I think from police knowledge, from knowing where we have incidents, smoking areas are a flashpoint, whether or not they're managed or not. So I think I'll leave that one there. That was submitted, we actually went past the premises earlier on today. There is a door that is not on that plan drawing. Can you explain to me what that door will be used for? On the... Sorry, yeah. On the drawing, it's marked as storage. It's actually an exterior door. Chair, would you like me to come and show you where I mean on the drawing?
It's actually a door and it's not storage. Where did you get the storage from?
I think that's what it says on here, isn't it? Doesn't it say storage? I'm pretty sure I've zoomed in and it does say storage. My eyesight's not very good. Yeah. But it is a door. It's just that it wasn't on the plan drawing. So I would just like to know, is that door going to... If you look at the plan drawing, I don't know if you've got the same as me, it's an internal door that it says storage. There's no external door on that outer wall.
What my client says is that it is a door, it's an emergency exit door.
Excuse me, on the plans, There is nothing to say there's an external door there. It just says the door internally to storage.
Something that, you bear with me, let me look through what other documents my client's got that I can share with you. From my view of the photograph that your legal advisor has shown me through EHA, it is shown as a door on the plan. It's a recessed door, and so the door is, if you look on your plan, you see the swing of the door, you see that little arc that's drawn there, that's the door.
So we decided that's the door.
An external door. Thank you. Sorry, yes. So I just wanted clarification is whether that external door is going to be used for dispersal of customers or anything like that, please.
It's used as a fire escape, that door.
Thank you very much. And I think just one other thing for myself. Can we just confirm who the designated premises supervisor will be for the actual premises itself?
My client is the DPS on this application, and if granted, then he would cease to be DPS on the other licensed premises, so he would commit all of his time to managing this.
Okay, thank you. So currently his DPS of the Emperor on Hills Road, is that correct? So so what you've just said is if this is permitted, he will not be the DPS of that premises, but of this one. Thank you. It's just that I wanted clarification because I know the other premises is very busy as well. And I know it doesn't preclude you being DPS of 2 premises, but that makes it easier. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just get through the other people who want, and then I'll come back to you, Sam. Councillor Beck, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions because there seems to be a certain fluidity in what is actually being applied for here, and the representative of the applicant has made this sound very different, but I just think it's important for us to understand are the differences in the actual fundamentals that would matter to the decision about an application being granted. And the first question in relation to that is the relevance of the Pizza Hut, the old Pizza Hut license, which the applicant has requested to be available to us, and we've all got, indicates that Pizza Hut had a license in hours that didn't go longer than midnight and didn't include any music. So it's really quite different from that I think we thought we all had at the beginning of this. So I don't. Is the applicant saying that the hours go back to midnight for this application and there will be no music? I don't think so by the virtue of other bits of the conversation. So what actually is the relevance to the applicant of the Pizza Hut licence, given that we are in a cumulative impact area? That's the first question.
The relevance is quite simply this, that Pizza Hut was licensed premises in the CIA, and that it didn't lose its licence through either revocation or review proceedings or crime and disorder, and that normally the starting point for a new licence application in the CIA is that there's a rebuttable presumption that no new licences ought to be granted. The purpose of the Pizza Hut licences is that actually that puts a different nuance on this particular application, because my submission is that the starting point ought to be, at the very least, we ought to have a licence similar to Pizza Hut as a licence rather than no licence at all at this particular location. So that's the importance of that, and Environmental Health and Cambridge Police took that on board when we had a brief opportunity to speak earlier, and it goes back to the Home Office guidance, paragraph 1444, again, which then sets out about a CIA policy ought not to be inflexible, and then and it gives an example of restaurants being one of those ones, and theatres where local authorities can exercise some discretion. So the starting point really is that, you know, this is a licence that lapsed through nothing other than the climate brought on by the pandemic for restaurant-type premises. It wasn't as a result of any regulatory action, and at the very least, the licensing subcommittee ought to consider granting a licence in those similar terms if they don't accede to my client's request for what he's asked for.
Yeah, I understand that. The increment between the hours of the original Pizza Hut licence and the additional activity of music, which you're arguing an addition to the existing licensing burden in the city centre. Okay. Okay. Still puts an onus on you to prove some things, I think. But the second question is, in your presentation, you talked about no admission after a certain time, which I've forgotten, but you said no admission after a certain time. And I wonder whether you actually meant readmission. It seemed to me a bit unlikely that the original people who went into the building would get smaller and smaller and smaller because new customers couldn't. So some clarity about whether you meant readmission or admission.
I meant admission, no admission after a certain time. So then you're not having, if we're saying that up to 25 non-diners could be in the premises, you're not having somebody going in beyond midnight Sunday to Thursday or 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday for a drink in their premises. And that's why it was no admission that was put before the committee.
So after midnight, no one extra can go in. So if you
No-
want to be
no
there
new
between
customers.
midnight and when it closes, you have to be there before midnight. Okay, thank you. And the third question was about the smoking area, and like the police representatives, I have a concern about that, and I wondered, in actual fact, how you intend, in practical terms, to exercise control over people standing in the public realm outside the premises, where conversations will strike up, passers-by will join in maybe, and it kind of seems to me on the face of it to control the numbers that conglomerate there. Don't please repeat what you've already said, but I just would like to understand in practical terms how that is controlled.
In regard to that, sir, is obviously, as a doorman myself, when you see X amount of people exiting a venue to go outside for a cigarette, you're constantly monitoring it anyhow, because then you are to see, as the actual police officer said, it is a main spike area of anywhere, but that is where you are constantly in a monitor. So as a doorman, you're 24/7. If you've got 7 or 8 people standing outside, and you know 4 or 5 of those have come out of the venue, then you only know those 4 or 5 people are going back into the venue. So it's a constant monitoring system. So you're always 24/7, you're watching it.
Sorry, but monitoring is not control. So monitoring means that you know that maybe more than you intend to be there and so on. But what do you actually do about it if there are more people having monitored it?
If it's the monitoring side, if you've got more people that have joined that group, then you would go and disperse and find out, and then you'll actually sort of contact and sort of put yourself into the middle of the group and find out the reason why. If there is a confrontation happening, then as a door staff, then you will then stop that confrontation. Then you will walk the person away from the venue. And then, so that is then, it's leading on. It's a constant 24/7 principle.
Have no powers in the public realm off the premises.
My client does, of course, management of years of experience in managing licensed premises and managing people who go and smoke. Security company, years of experience in working at licensing premises and dealing with those of which I've had no evidence as to breaches that arise from their experience at their premises. And ultimately, of course, they can deny people return into a premises if they're not going to comply. And furthermore, if there is going to be an issue, they can, of course, work with Cambridgeshire Police to say, actually, there is an issue, we're going to require your assistance. And so there are various measures that are in place. But one of the pertinent points, which I've said before, is this is a licensed premises, which has been in existence of all of that time. And throughout that time, when people will have come and gone out to smoke and gone back into a premises, there is no evidence before us that it's given rise to the concerns that you suggest today.
Thanks for the answer, but I mean, I think this is location specific, not applicant specific. And I think the police's awareness that they get drawn into that is a key issue here.
I'm sorry, the point that I was making was location specific, because obviously this location where people have gone out to smoke in the past, and there is no evidence before us of the concerns that you're bringing to the committee today.
Pardon. Thank you, Councillor Bick. Mr. Image Flowers, do you have anything you'd like to clarify, ask?
I think the key points that obviously we would like to have addressed is around the concerns about noise. You have referred to system that will reduce the amount of noise, or at least we could help monitoring noise. I think your application from Mr. Veal does state on page 5 about to quantify this with formal testing. Can you just talk us through how that might actually happen, please?
When you talk about testing, is this with premises in use or prior to use?
It would be both.
Both. Present time, sorry,
So-
at the present time there has been no testing.
Correct.
If the client wishes that to be carried out, it can be. The nature of the venue and the type of music, it's not, as I understand it, going to be loud music, quite quiet in its volume level, and therefore is of less significance than other types of venue. What is also being proposed is electronic monitoring of that with thresholds that, should it get unreasonably loud or louder than the threshold set, that it would do one of two things. Firstly, indicate that the level is being exceeded. If it continues for 20 seconds longer, no action is taken, then it would turn off the power to any amplification. Quite a hard stop to prevent it being exceeded. And I think one needs to bear in mind that this is either live music, intended for Latino type, so it's bongos, not drums, and it's also background music for diners who wouldn't want to be over-impressed with loud music.
Councillor Carling's just got one more question and then we'll go on to the police.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is in relation to the idea of people not being able to take their drinks out to smoke. So presumably they will then leave them on the table or such like. I'm just wondering what provision there might be for anti-drink spiking at that time. Are there enough staff to make sure that drinks aren't going to be spiked while left on tables and such like?
I suppose there are a number of points to contemplate in one way. One, this is people sat at tables rather than strangers. Okay, predominantly, all of the evidence suggesting about laced drink is those involving some stranger who slips an item into a drink that's left unattended. And it's in a very different situation, one in terms of vertical drinking, rather than sat down at tables. So my clients have waiter and waitress staff that are dedicated to monitoring the tables, and of course they can be alert to those types of things within their premises. But beyond that, then looking at the type and nature of the premises that they are, that type of issue that you refer to is one that doesn't readily lend itself to this type of premises.
Could I please now ask the police representative to address the committee?
Chair, I thank Mr Thomas for your additions to the original application. It has been helpful. I think from my side of things, if you were looking for conditions that were the same as Pizza Hut with the same hours, my concerns would be much lower than they currently are at the moment. I think I've still got concerns about the lateness of hours. We're still not 100% sure about the timings of closure of the kitchen. And so therefore, currently there is an opportunity to have potentially 4 hours of pure drinking time after a table meal has been consumed. So therefore, I do still have concerns about those. And I think that's something that needs to be carefully considered. I think restaurant conditions, again, would be sufficient. I've still got a question mark about the non-restaurant conditions for 25 people. But all I can say is if Mr Thomas says that that's a manageable thing for his client to do, then that is for his client to do. I still do have my concerns from a policing perspective on this application, so I'll just ask you to consider it very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the police?
Wait, sorry.
To the drink spiking issues, I wonder if the applicant could confirm, okay, whether he's had any involvement with the city's nighttime safety programme at the Emperor's Public House, and whether he could describe that to us.
Sorry, I think when I sum up to you, I will address that, and if you don't mind, because I will clarify what my client's instructions are in terms of that. In terms of your procedure, I thought we'd moved on to the police section. We'd finished with questions for me, so I apologise, I wasn't prepared for that.
Does the licensing officer have anything to ask the police? No. The applicant want to clarify any points with the police officer's report? No. Okay. Councillor Bick? No. Mr Flowers, Imogen Flowers? Please, could you address the committee?
Very much. So the main concerns that we had, I think we have covered in relation to noise from the premises. I think Mr Beard has kindly updated us, but the other major concern would be patrons leaving the venue at night, potentially causing statutory nuisance. Obviously, we're aware in the new application of extended, what I would describe as extended drinking hours. I do have concerns about, again, how people would be managed outside of the building. It's not been clear to me how that would actually occur in a public place. Where a group of people could all go out for a cigarette or just a bit of fresh air at the end of the night. If they've been drinking excessively for excessive periods of time, they may have had a meal, they may not. It's not entirely clear in the application how many. So I do have ongoing concerns about you could have heavily intoxicated people being very loud and raucous walking down the streets. There are approximately 57 apartments around the venue, which could lead to potential statutory nuisance claims from those people with late night leavers.
Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr Inchflowers? Licensing officer, would you have any questions for him? The police? Applicant? Applicant, do you have any questions for Mr Image-Files? Councillor Vick? Councillor Vick, would you like to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair. I've submitted a written representation with my colleague Ward Councillor, Councillor Porritt. So we're doing that as ward councillors representing the area that includes this, this address. As you can see from some of the papers, the ward that we represent consists of the largest concentration of licensed premises in the city. I think it needs to be put on record that that's something that we absolutely recognise is a feature of a city centre, and the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of licence applications in that area go without any representation from us, because this is a place that people come to use premises, and it's part of the nighttime economy of the city. However, the process exists in order to enable the subcommittee to identify those few applications which don't really fit and don't really work. And our view is that this is one of them. Our concern is the first three licensing objectives, but particularly the third one on public nuisance. And it's also the failure to respond to the implications of the cumulative impact area, which, unless addressed, should lead to the default rejection of an application like this. And it is interesting to look at the Pizza Hut application, as we've been invited to do, but I think in technical terms there is no licensed premise there at the moment, and this is an increment. And I don't think any of us have an ability to tell us how far back we have to go to find former licensed premises that somehow justify a future one. And the scene has changed and is changing all the time, and I think we have to make a decision on the merits of each individual application in that sense. From our point of view, the building and the location is particularly ill-suited for an application of this kind, in particular by virtue of its extended hours. I mean, these are even within the city centre at the extreme end, and also the inclusion of music. The concern is that we represent people who live reasonably close to this address, that we have dealt with noise-related complaints and issues from those people, and something that involves activity, organised activity involving music, to the early hours of the morning is going to be an aggravating factor. And if you want to draw in the Pizza Hut precedent, then it's clearly in those respects different and much more than that. We also have concerns about the smoking, the accommodation of smoking. It seems to us that this is really by virtue of where this building is, and its extremely constrained internal nature, that it seems to us essentially a quite unmanageable thing to start regimenting people outside in the public realm in the way that being told in the committee. We have to have a concern as representing residents also in the city centre that people deserve to sleep. Yes, they have chosen to live in the city centre, but there is a balance and there is a line that does need to be drawn even there. And it is, I think many of us think, our good fortune that we have a lot of people who do live in our city centre, provides natural surveillance. But you know, those people do require some consideration and a line to be drawn. The final point is really arising from what I've heard in the proceedings so far this morning, that the tone from the applicant is very, implies a very fluid approach to an application which had to be written on paper some time ago and submitted, and itself generated then public and input. Now, tone is certainly different from what we've heard this morning, but there have been aspects of this which have sounded a bit like a licensing workshop rather than a licensing application hearing, and I think it does undermine a little bit of one's confidence in the actual ability to deliver on some of the things that are being talked about, because they seem to be drummed up during the meeting. And I think we all live in the real world and know that on the one hand we have the boundaries that are going to be set by any decision to grant a license, but we also know that there has to be a business model the other side of it, and it just seems that there has been some lack of certainty and clarity about what that is and how that relates to what's apparently being thrown around as options and opportunities that are different and separate from what was written in the application. So it's a question of competence as far as I'm concerned, and I've not also attended a licensing application which has lacked so much of the essential detail, which of course is what the decision is about. Obviously, flexibility is welcome, and in a way it's positive, but after a certain extent, it does undermine confidence about the knowledge of the procedure and then the ability to kind of comply with whatever a decision is after it's been made. So that's my contribution to support the written application, the written evidence I gave.
Thank you, Councillor Bick. Councillors, do you have any questions for Councillor Bick, please?
Thank you for that, Councillor Bick. You've mentioned residents nearby sort of having issues with the premises, noise and such like. Have you received any representations or spoken to residents directly? Because I know that there haven't been any direct contributions from residents in the area.
And residents I have a close relationship, know that I look out for these things on their behalf, and I have an understanding of the pattern of their concerns. And I think this is something that I undertake as their representative to look out for.
Licensing officer, do you have any questions for Councillor Bick? No. Mr. Environmental Officer, do you have any questions, please? No. Okay, thank you, Councillor Bick. I will now ask the licensing officer to summarise their points, please.
Thank you. I'll just refer you to page 10 of the bundle, which is options, which is subsection 5. Whilst having reference to the information provided by the applicant, the information raised in the representation, and also Cambridge City Council Statement of Licensing Policy and Cumulative Impact Assessment, the subcommittee's decision must be made with a view to promoting one or more of the 4 licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. Members should take such steps that they consider are necessary for the promotion of the licensing objectives. The subcommittee may resolve to grant the licence subject to the mandatory conditions and those conditions offered by the applicant, which may be modified to such an extent as the authority considers necessary for the promotion of the licensing objectives. To exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. To refuse to specify a person in the licence as the premises supervisor, or to reject the application, and members must give reasons for their decision. Can I also ask that everyone returns the Pizza Hut licence at the end of this hearing, because it's got personal information on it.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, please now summarise your points. And Mr. Garcia Lopez, is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, Ma'am, thank you very much. You allowed me to talk to you at length, and so I'll try not to be too repetitive now. The purpose of us coming together at a licensing subcommittee meeting is to discuss an application. It is a conversation, it is a discussion. It is not something that is set in stone before the applicant comes before you. And of course, you will have sat through many committee hearings, or certainly your colleagues and predecessors will have done, where applications are fluid. It's the whole behind the Act itself and how we're supposed to engage with one another. And whilst people may levy criticism that my client acted in person in his application, and that's unmerited in terms of what we've discussed before you today. Now, the starting point I said for you in terms of your discretion to apply is that one of, from my submission, this isn't an application that should be refused. The issue for you as a subcommittee is whether or not you use your powers to grant a licence which is aligned to what was in existence previously, which is Pizza Hut, and that's the relevance of that before you, in the knowledge that that wasn't removed because of crime and disorder and public nuisance, and nothing has moved on. There's been no change in use of that premises from a planning perspective or anything else. It's been mothballed since it was closed. And it's always the expectation, and with your planning and licensing committees that went before you, that those were licensed premises within this part of the city. So it's wrong to suggest that we should disregard that entirely, and it's not a proposition from my discussions with either the police or environmental health that holds water with them either. In narrowing down the issues, they were content to accept that actually they'd be more content with a restaurant licence in terms similar to that, with a midnight cessation of activities for alcohol and late night refreshment, rather than what my client was hoping to achieve. But you as this licensing committee have that power, and your licensing officer's given you a reminder of that in paragraph 5.2 of his report. It's for you to decide in terms of what would be the relevant parts for a licence. But the starting point, as I say, is that a licence is sensible. What's the alternative for you? These are premises which are ready to open in terms of restaurant premises, and they could open. They could open and be a bring your own alcohol premises. Don't need a licence for what they're doing there. What's better? To have premises that are licensed and controlled by conditions, or premises which aren't? But as a matter of law, it's quite right and proper for me to bring the Pizza Hut licence to your attention, and it's quite right and proper for me to suggest where there's been no change of use in the intervening period and no other evidence that leads me to accept there's any fundamental change in the vicinity of these premises, that to suggest we shouldn't be using that licence as a starting base from which to work. And I put you, that's my starting base. My client has, through conversation and through representations I've given to you today, set out what he would like to do here quite clearly. And he's caveated that and given certain protections. So we know that he would have a capacity of 85 persons in his premises. We know that they would all be sat at tables, so there would be no vertical drinking. We've said that no persons would be able to take a drink outside the premises, monitored by staff and monitored by security provision that we've said would be at the premises. We have meet and greet in terms of taking people their tables. We have waiters and waitresses who are serving people at the tables. There is little or no movement within the premises once people are within them itself. We have supervision from an experienced security company, and there's no evidence that's been brought to me about that. In terms of Pizza Hut, we know it's been in operation pre-2005, which was when the local authority assumed its power. And so we know that it closed in September 2020. So from 2005 to 2020, I've got 15 years in which those premises have operated, 15 years when the councillor and Cambridgeshire Police and Environmental Health can all bring to you evidence of what the problems smokers have caused in congregating outside that premises when it's open for licensed activity. And there is no evidence of that being a concern, an actual concern, then with evidence brought to you before the committee. And so when you hear these comments that come from the responsible authorities and interested parties about smoking, it's a perceived concern. And it's not borne out by any evidence that they've brought to you. And of course, you'll know from the case of Daniel Thwaites, and your legal advisor will know that as well, that part of your decision needs to be evidence-based when you're thinking about things like that, which are either a perception or something they can hang their hat on. They've had 15 years where they might have been able to bring something to your attention in terms of that, and I've got no evidence that supports that proposition. What I do have is an operator who's operated within the city and operated within the cumulative impacts area. There's no evidence about him and whether or not he's not been able to meet the licensing objectives going forward. There's a complete absence of that. So you have an operator who, unchallenged in terms of what he can deliver within this licensable area and what he wants to do. I'm saying to you that the conditions and restrictions that we're putting on are such that And I'm quite happy to set those out in a Word document while you retire if you wish to do so, but we've been through them and you'll know what they are, and I've repeated many of them just now. The no entry to the premises after midnight, Sunday to Thursday, 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday, and all of those other conditions as well. I'm happy to set out my stock in terms of that if you retire and you wish me to do so. But from my client's perspective, Ma'am, this is an application that ought to be granted in and in terms of the sorry, I've lost my train of thought just for a moment. So it's an application that ought to be granted, and I think we've set out our stock. Now, there were a couple of points that were just made just in summary here. One that I've made in terms of this complete absence of evidence about smoking that's perceived to be an issue that's before you. And similarly, in terms of the concerns that have been raised from the local councillors, and thank you, Councillor Carling, you asked the only one question that I was going to ask this councillor in terms of, has he been contacted by any local resident regarding this application to raise this representation to this licensing subcommittee? The answer to which is no. There is no local resident who has raised a concern. The hotel opposite my client's premises has not raised a concern. The concerns are raised by these responsible authorities, and then in bringing their concerns, then they're not supported by any evidence that relates to more than 15 years trade associated with the premises licence that went before me. In terms of the entertainment that we would like to put on, regulated entertainment, you've heard from that, measures that can be put in place in terms of noise limiting device and background music that we want to play in the premises that isn't going to give rise to that noise escape that's been perceived, and a noise limiting device that we're content to have set in place with the agreement of the Environmental Health Department. The Environmental Health Officer in his representation did ask actually for 3 conditions if you were minded to grant this application. Those are set out within the body of that representation, and I can confirm that my client is quite content that he would accept those conditions. A sound management plan indicating how sound frequency would be managed and the limitations to 80 decibels, the weekly recording of the sound testing, and a queue management plan. Those are set out on page 51, and my client would submit that those are all measures that he would agree and put in place before any licensable activity were conducted at his premises. Ma'am, I think I've addressed you quite fully in terms of my client's application, and certainly I cannot submit to you strongly enough that this is one of those occasions where your discretion can be applied to grant a licence. At its lowest, a restaurant licence to midnight. At its highest, what my client seeks, to 1 a.m., which is 30 minutes longer than the former licence, Sunday to Thursday, and then 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. You have powers, if you wish to do so, to modify those hours in any other way you choose fit to do so, but certainly, Ma'am, I certainly do not think that this is an application that either ought to be refused or rejected in its entirety, but certainly an application that is granted in one form or another. Thank you, Ma'am.
The subcommittee will discuss the decision in private session, and if necessary will ask for legal advice on the wording of the decision. The legal advisor and committee manager will be present at this session if requested. Members will leave this room and go to the members' lounge to deliberate the decision in private. Please do not go far. You are welcome to sit on the landing and take a drink from the machine or stay in this room. When the decision has been made, I will read out the decision of this committee to you. A signed copy of the record of decision will be handed to the applicant to take with you. Before the subcommittee considers the decision, does the legal advisor have any further advice for the subcommittee?
Madam, thank you. I suppose my advice in the first instance is limited to the practicalities, in that you have I'm aware of the time, and you have a number of decisions to be made, and it may well be that it will be a staging of decisions. I think from a practical point of view, you suggest about people remaining in the building. I think to reach the first stage of your decision is going to take longer than waiting in the corridor. So with your approval, I'm minded to suggest that perhaps 2 o'clock, you might have an indication for me as to which way you're thinking, and I can bring that to the parties present and see where we go. Madam, the applicant through his representative has said that conditions may well be drafted. If you're minded, and I'm not prejudging anything whatsoever, but if you're minded to go down that route, then I will certainly welcome that from the applicant. I've made various notes through, but I want to make sure that we incorporate all that potentially is on offer. There has been comment made that there was no pre-application communication, discussions. Madam, that is good practice, but it is not written in stone. There's no compulsion on any party to do so. The difficulty is that we have a hybrid hearing like this, where we're not potentially not considering from the representation that which has been given in writing, but that's a consequence that, that we all have to live with. Present, because I don't know what's in your mind, I don't know what further advice to offer. I don't want to tell you things that you don't need. I think I will leave it at that for the time being. If I come back to see you just before 2 o'clock, and I'm not saying you've got to sit there until 2 o'clock, but come back and see you just before 2 o'clock, see what's initially in your mind, and ask parties to be available for about 2 o'clock. Again, I'm giving no guarantee on timing, but it would be useful if they were, and see where we get to after that. Is there anything in particular you want me to address at this stage, madam?
I think we might like you a few minutes after we retire in private.
More than happy to pop in.
As if you were clear of the deliberation process. So if we meet back here for 2 o'clock, thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming back. Thank you very much for all your recommendations for conditions. They are going to take a little bit of while to marry them up, but this is what we have come up with as the starting base for our conditions. What we would like is no more new admittance after the kitchen closes. We have as well done the closing times are Sunday to Thursday at midnight, Friday to Saturday at 1 a.m. So what we would like is a kitchen closing Sunday to Thursday at 11, and the kitchen closing...
11 o'clock. Can't be after 11.
You're using, although you're using the phrase kitchen closing, clearly with no late night refreshment licence, the kitchen has to shut. Your hours are going to exceed that. So if we can talk about hours of the day rather than concepts, that would be useful.
Yeah.
Can I suggest that we start off by saying what your high-level decision is, i.e. that there's going to be a licence?
Yes.
And can you confirm what the hours of that licence are going to be?
Okay, yes, we're going to grant an alcohol licence. If I can get my scribble sorted out here. Sunday to Thursday, midnight. No, that's
opening.
Sunday,
opening is Sunday to Thursday, midnight, Friday to Saturday, 1 a.m.
Bar closing half an hour before.
Bar closing half an hour before the premises shuts. Got that sorted.
yes, if I did, the opening hours will go through to the times that the chair has suggested, and bar will be closing in effect half an hour before
Thank you. We can
closing.
choose this.
Gives us the old-fashioned half-hour drinking up time. I'm assuming from our discussions, Madam, there's no issue with the commencement hour.
There is.
Yes, there is.
There is. Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, we didn't bring that up. Yes, we don't feel alcohol needs to be served until 12 midday. Nobody needs to drink at 8 in the morning. Come on.
The commencement time was not an issue before the licensing subcommittee. The terminal hour was an issue. And in discussions with Cambridgeshire Police, we would be more inclined to allow the commencement hour at 8 a.m, but to make it conditional upon having it ancillary to food. So, for example, I may come along and I may want a Bucks Fizz or I may want a Prosecco. It's very limited in what happens, but it is ancillary to food, and otherwise you're preventing a marketplace which is does exist, and it's something that Cambridgeshire Police are quite happy with.
So what are your views on this about serving alcohol from, sorry, it's because serving alcohol from 8 in the morning?
Oh, is that work? It's working. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had a discussion, and from a crime and disorder perspective, we don't have issues with early sort of morning drinking. It is normally, as Mr. Thomas says, ancillary to food, i.e. a Bucks Fizz with breakfast. So we don't have an issue with the early sort of 8 o'clock onwards, but as long as it's with a meal with food. Thank you.
Well, we won't cross it out, sir, but we just need to discuss it a bit more. And I just want to ask a question of the applicant, because obviously people are going to be allowed out to smoke. It's irrelevant, you know, I don't smoke, but I can understand that. Is it possible the only place we can think of them going is Regent Terrace? We can't think of anywhere else for them to go unless they go under the big lamppost in the middle. But is it possible for you to put some sort of box on the wall so that cigarette ends can actually be deposited in there and not on the ground in Regent's Terrace? Because even though most people vape now, you do still get people who smoke cigarettes, and it's a disgusting thing and it needs to be put there. So I'm just asking me personally if that would be possible.
I think my client would very happily do all he could to avoid that litter. And so I think you can rest assured from the indication of my client that we would do all we could possibly could there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, what else did we decide here, people? Live music? Is there a...
Madam, bear in mind that with the provision of the Live Music Act, live music is permissible without needing to be licensed up to 11 o'clock at night. And with the hours that you've put in place, if there is any regulated entertainment, he says using the old term, prior to 11 o'clock, it's outside your control. If it's after 11 o'clock, then if there's no license for it, then it becomes a matter of enforcement should it be necessary.
Yeah, we're quite happy for the live music to go on while the bar is open. Most of it, if my two councillors here are quite happy, is that we really need to go away and think about this a bit more, because we've had information from the police, information from you, we have our own council. It's not something that can be decided within the next 10, 15 minutes.
Ma'am, if it helps members of the committee, the police and I were discussing. So I had drafted some conditions. I'd shared them with my colleague for the police. Unfortunately, they don't have Wi-Fi to be able to play with those. So what we were going to propose was, if you are minded to give the indication you've given already of a grant, I will send to the officer my draft version. That doesn't have some of the Cambridge conditions that we like to have, and so the officers kindly agreed to amend mine, which aren't Cambridge ones, into what is like locally. We can then send you by, say, tomorrow lunchtime, an agreed set of conditions that you know that the applicant and Cambridge Police agree, and then you could then look to then include those. My client has already indicated that the EHO conditions were agreed, and those were the three conditions that sat within his representation, and there were no proposals in terms of the interested parties. So you would know then that you've got an agreed position going forward, and it would hopefully enable you to make that decision quite quickly.
If I can, looking at the conditions in the EHO, there was a suggestion, I thought, within the hearing of a noise limiter. Is that within the EHO conditions?
And of course, that's when we're looking at doing these until 3 o'clock in the morning, and the goalpost is shift, so I don't know whether you still need that. We will be installing a noise
If you can
device.
include the environmental health officer within the discussions,
Yeah.
I would be grateful. That way I know it's a three-way approach.
I have your email address anyway, don't I? You would have received an email from me on Friday, hopefully. Lovely, okay. A helpful way forward for you, Mark.
Thank you all for your patience. It's been a long time since I did this. Thank you.
I have just one addition, which is to put in Ask Angela training.
Oh, yes.
Normally a standard Cambridge condition.
Madam, I thank you and your colleagues for all that you've done so far today. If you retire now, I'll come and join you in a moment. Everyone attending, again, my thanks to you for your engagement in the process. If you can agree conditions and send them through, did you say midday tomorrow? Was it 4 o'clock tomorrow? Yep, that's fine. I'm not hung up on the time. Now that the basic decision, safe to say that now the basic decision is we've got 5 days in which to get the decision notice out. And I don't want to prejudice that timescale. And councillors and I will meet probably remotely after they come through to sort of finalise the document.
I will make sure that the officer and I will reach agreement and that I have that agreed condition with you by midday tomorrow, and then it gives you your timetable to work to. Because I think from my client's perspective, the sooner we have something that's agreed, the sooner he can put in place all of the things he needs to.
I was just going to mention that I have meetings until 9:30 tomorrow. That's PM. I would encourage you, considering how many different sets of conditions are and how detailed they are.
I think, councillor, that the way we're going to deal with it, the conditions will come in, they will be circulated, and if the four of us can meet remotely early on Wednesday morning, no.
Wednesday, I've got planning all day.
The four of us can meet remotely sometime fairly shortly to get it resolved. I don't see that it being a long meeting, but we can get something sorted out.
Well, we'll look at our diaries when we withdraw and tell you when we'll actually be looking at it. I also have planning all day Wednesday.
Can I just double check, Claire, are they coming to you, the email still? Yeah, perfect.